Hello, everyone, and welcome to another talk today. Today, we're going to talk about what I potentially think is the most interesting part of the cognitive unit. Um, and that's saying something because I find a lot of this very interesting. But this is the idea of reconstructive memory. And as we'll talk about today, reconstructive memory is a theory about how we sort of bring memories and retrieve memories from long-term storage to short-term memory and the process through which that memory goes. So there are really two major misconceptions about memory. The first one is that our memories are exact. And by this, it means that, we sort of like we're recording an image as if it's exactly how that image took place. But as we can sort of think about, and as we've talked about with schema theory, our biases and the ways in which we view the world and our experiences can sort of change our perception of how a memory actually occurred. And that's why, different perspectives matter so much because we can have a totally different viewing and totally different interpretation of the same exact event that happened. And our memories can be changed over time through outside information as well. And research shows that both of these are incorrect. Our memories are not just reconstructive, but they are constructive as well. And by this, we're talking about the fact that as we retrieve these memories from long-term storage, it can change over time. Our memory of an event can really change over time based on, either societal factors, things going on in the news, how we view situations, all of those sorts of things. You may have a memory from childhood where you view that with a different lens now that more information has come out about the person you were with, different cultural norms have changed. All of those sorts of things can change our memories. So with reconstructive memory, just a few background pieces here. So at times there are cases of memory unreliability, such as memory distortions. It means that we remember things that did not exactly happen. And this is explained by the theory of reconstructive memory, which suggests that memory is not passive retrieval of information from long-term memory. Um, Rather than having a video clip that is brought from our long-term storage into short-term storage, it's really more like a puzzle. And as we'll see later on, sometimes we miss a few of the puzzle pieces. And it does recognize two types of information, both information obtained during perceptions of the event, and then external post-event information. And so over time, information from the two sources can get so connected that we are unable to tell them apart. So for instance, let's say that you were playing in a basketball game and you thought you were playing really well, but when you came off the floor, another one of the players told you that you stunk, right? Instead of continuing to think that you did well, perhaps your memory of this basketball game that you thought you did really well in suddenly becomes one in which you feel like you were a failure. And that's sort of where this information can get tied together, and we can take memories and sort of distort them in that way. So again, think of this like a puzzle. As we've seen with during the quarantine, a lot of people were doing puzzles. I'm sure more than a few of them were missing a puzzle piece or two. Now, instead of just having this blank puzzle piece that isn't filled in by anything, our brains try to make sense of these lapses in memory by adapting them and filling them in with possible other information, which may or may not be true. And that leads to a little bit of unreliability in our memory as well. There's a few other factors that are related to reconstructive memory. So the first concept here is confabulation. So this is a memory based on a fabricated, distorted, or misinterpreted memory, often believed to be true in spite of contradictory evidence. It's almost like what the truth was didn't make sense to us, and so we've created this alternate memory that contains both truth and fake memories. The next one is schema processing. So memory processing based on prior knowledge in the form of schemas, which could result in distortion. As we talked about with schema theory, different concepts and different ways in which we organize information can lead to a little bit of bias in terms of how we think of certain memories. And then also false memories. So recalling an event that never happened and believing it to be true. So what I want you to do is to pause the video, and I want you to, without cheating and looking at an actual penny, I want you to tell me which one was the correct penny. And I'll wait. All right, if you've guessed and paused it, the correct answer is actually A. But think about how hard it was for us to reconstruct in our minds what an actual penny looked like. Oftentimes we can be thrown off by information like even the fact that the date is over here, or what goes into this part of the penny, or is it in God we trust or is it something else? All of those things can sort of throw off our memory of something we've seen hundreds and possibly thousands of times. So one way that reconstructive memory sort of calls into question our accuracy of memory is in the faultiness of eyewitness testimony. Oftentimes, eyewitness testimony is used in court cases where someone could possibly be going to jail based on that testimony for the rest of their life. And effects of our reconstructive memory can be quite drastic because of this. This becomes incredibly important. Our memories, especially in traumatic or emotional situations, can be skewed, and this could lead to dire consequences for someone else. And oftentimes what we found is that jurors have valued eyewitness testimony, even though it's often unreliable. As the statistic says down here, 75% of overturned cases from DNA evidence, those people have been in jail as the result of faulty eyewitness testimony. And this doesn't mean that those testifying are just flat out lying. But what it does mean is that, they have in some ways their memory has changed to some degree, and that could be due to 3 different variables which we have right here on the right. The first one is the phrasing of a question. The second one is the information supplied after an event, and then also the repetition of misleading information about an event. And so things like media reports, the questioning from the prosecutor, what your lawyers have told you, the fears and memories of that event and combining it with other things, all of these things could sort of change your viewpoint of what actually happened and what the truth was. So what we have here is a YouTube video that I highly suggest you watch. And it is the story of a woman who was sexually assaulted, and this is from 60 Minutes. And even during her attack, she had tried to study the face of the person. She did not want to get this wrong. And they ended up arresting an individual. She testifies and says that definitely was the person. And this person ends up in jail for 7 years. And what was actually the case was that this person had not done this crime. And I think it's a great story, not only for looking at the faultiness of eyewitness testimony, but in thinking about forgiveness as well, because the man who was unfairly put in jail, the amount of forgiveness he shows for this is really unbelievable, and at times a lesson when we have been slighted in our own lives. All right, so the first study we're going to look at here is really one of the early pioneering studies on reconstructive memory that was shown. And this is another study that you could possibly use in your IA because this is quite a popular psychological study. So the aim was to investigate whether memory can be altered by misleading post-event information. And what they did was a independent measures design experiment. So people were in one group and one group only. And it included university students. Group experiment 1 was with 45 students. Experiment 2 was with 150 students. So with experiment 1, participants were shown recordings of traffic accidents and then given a questionnaire with a number of questions about the accident they had just witnessed. And only one of these questions was one that was critical for research, and that was about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. And this was followed up, and for each of the groups, the verb, in this case hit, was changed with different verbs. So they had either smashed, collided, bumped, hit, or contacted. And the independent variable in this case, the misleading post-event information, the second one was the speed estimate. And what they theorized is that a more extreme verb like smash would, and sorry for my pause there, like smashed would cause subjects to give a higher estimate of speed. And so your memory of what happened in the experiment would be sort of guided by the verb that they used to question you with. Experiment 2, participants were shown a film of a car accident. They then filled out a questionnaire. 3 groups got different versions of the critical question. They either smashed into each other, hit each other, or no critical question. And then a week later, participants were given another questionnaire with 10 questions that included one critical yes or no question. Did you see broken glass? And again, this is a week later. So the independent variable in this one, the emotional intensity of verb, and then whether or not they had seen broken glass for the dependent variable. So the results, experiment 1, smash groups estimated the highest possible speed, with contacted being the lowest. Again, contacted out of those was probably the least intense of the verbs. And you can see there it's almost a 10 mile per hour difference in terms of the speed, so a huge amount of difference. And then for experiment 2, the emotional intensity of the verb, if they got the smashed question, 32% reported broken glass, no critical question, 12%. Huge differences. And so this clearly demonstrates as a conclusion, especially in experiment 1, that misleading post-event information influences accounts of an event. And experiment 2 was done to rule out response bias with the week later they asked the question. And so, really you can see here that, people are quite affected by the questions that are raised. So in terms of evaluating the study, it's strong, it's well studied, it's been repeated many, many times, so the reliability is strong. Other factors have been found in other research as to why testimony is unreliable, like culture, memory processes of encoding, storage, retrieval, stress, which back up a lot of these. But the limitation that comes in is it ethical to deceive people in this way? And does the benefits outweigh the risk? That would be something to answer for yourself, but, I would say that the risk to mental health is somewhat low, other than in the possibility that you had been in an accident yourself and maybe this conjures up bad memories. The second one is a study we've already seen, Allport and Postman. So again, the aim was, how does schema theory impact our memory and recall? So participants saw a picture of a black man and a white man arguing, with the white man brandishing a knife. And then participants were quickly shown a picture and asked to describe the details of the picture. And on recall, many participants using reconstructive memory remembered that the other person, the black male was holding the knife, tying itself to stereotypes from culture. And that's why stereotypes are so powerful and so negative in most every case to the thinking of individuals well after whatever jokes or whatever context in which it's used. In most every way, it ends up more negative than it ever does good for anyone. And so these racist or misogynistic or weight-based or ethnicity-based stereotypes are so powerful in terms of changing even people's memories. I mean, imagine if this was a real crime and someone misremembered this. This could lead to dire consequences for individuals. So the conclusion was that schema theory really impacted memory. The societal stereotypes and prejudices impact individual thinking, our schema formation, our memory. But there is a limitation to this. As you might have been able to see, and sometimes I even can't see where the knife is, the drawing is hard and to see, it's unclear, especially when only being able to see that quickly. So this is just a video of another study that is like Loftus's. This is from Shaw, in which she asks participants to remember a fight that didn't actually happen. And she gets a lot of them to tell her information about this fight that didn't actually happen. So it's worth a look, definitely. All right, so in terms of reconstructive memory, there's a few memory processes that are in play here, and that's encoding, storage, and retrieval. Information can only be transferred and stored if it is first encoded, if we are first giving cues, if we are putting importance behind it in some way. Research shows people mainly use acoustic encoding, like word sounds, and then use semantic encoding, like the meaning of words, for storage and transfer into long-term memory. And long-term memory is obviously important for eyewitness testimony, since at the time of the trial, it's probably months and maybe even a year or two since the event actually occurred. And so participants in experiments have shown that they cluster words and categories for storage when faced with remembering long lists of info. And because of that, it can tie information that wasn't tied to the case into what you're studying here. So what, again, this causes is an interference. And information that is similar in format gets in the way of information trying to be recalled. And so as memory is being reconstructed, it can be blocked in a way by other information. And there's two types of interference with this. The first one is retroactive. New information received after an event or task influences memory before someone must recall it. And then proactive. Information from past experiences colors your perception of current events. And recency and primacy effect from the serial positioning effect are also in play here. So the next study we have here is Yuille and Cutshall from 1986. And this is an interview with elements of an experiment. And the aim was to investigate whether eyewitness accounts get distorted as a function of misleading post-event information in a naturalistic setting. And this naturalistic setting piece is important because it's different in ways from the Loftus study. This is an actual crime that took place that 13 eyewitnesses to this gun store robbery in Vancouver, Canada, actually witnessed. So the thought process was potentially there may be more of an emotional tie to this, and that it may change their memories of the events to make it more accurate. So with the procedure, the shooting was witnessed by 21 people, various viewpoints, interviewed by police. 4 months after the robbery, the researchers conducted interviews where they used experimental elements. They used these leading questions that were used in the Loftus study. And to determine the accuracy of participants' memories, they were compared to the official police records. So the results Misleading questions had very little effect on the recall, and participants were able to accurately recall a large number of details, which calls into question on a few different cases about reconstructive memory research. The first one is that reconstructive memory is a phenomenon that is only found in artificial conditions of lab experiments, which from our study of eyewitness testimony, I don't know if that's necessarily the case based on information out there. And then the second one, the study actually tapped into a different memory phenomenon, flashbulb memory. And this is, again, because it's come up a couple times, when a strong emotional experience leads to stronger encoding. And so because of that stronger encoding, they were less likely to be influenced by these leading questions. So in terms of looking at the evaluation of research on eyewitness testimony and reconstructive memory, again, most research of eyewitness testimony is lab-based, where inaccuracy in recall only have minimal consequences. And eyewitness testimony tends to be more accurate in real life than lab studies, even though we've been shown that 75% of people who get out of sentences due to DNA evidence were put in jail in the first place because of faulty eyewitness testimony. And then it's unclear whether recall inaccuracies are due to misleading information, are due to genuine changes in memory, or to confounding variables. Participants do not necessarily expect researchers to mislead them, so that may skew the results. And then the last point here, misleading information only affects unimportant aspects of memory. Memory of important events is not as easily distorted as well. So the last point here is a talk from Elizabeth Loftus, the Loftus and Palmer. And it's a great TED Talk to look at about her research in reconstructive memory and where that's gone. If you have any questions on reconstructive memory, please find me either through email or in class. And I hope you all have a great day.